Jesus. So last week we introduced you to Jesus. You probably already know who he is. So we did Jesus got born. Jesus got baptized. And Jesus was led into the wilderness, and he was what by the devil? What did Satan do it to him in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights? Luke? Trying to tempt him. Look at these rocks. Make them bread. Aren't you hungry? I got the whole world for you. Why don't you have it? Worship me, and I'll give you everything. And Jesus says, nope, and nope. All right? As soon as Jesus left Satan, or as soon as Satan, As soon as Satan left Jesus, he went and started teaching about God's kingdom. And we'll talk about that next week. One of the cool parts, though, is that there's a group of people called the Pharisees. Now, the Pharisees get a bad rap sometimes because Jesus is pretty kind of frustrated with them often. And they are also frustrated with Jesus a lot. Can anybody tell me who are the Pharisees? What's a Pharisee? Can anybody tell me what they think a Pharisee is? Sean?
They either did or did not believe in the resurrection.
Now, how's the Sadducees? They didn't believe in the resurrection. So these guys did believe in the resurrection. Okay, good. Kevin. Sorry, Kevin.
Is it Kevin?
No. Nope, not Kevin. What is a Pharisee? Anybody know? Joseph? Yes, Grady. That sounds like a Ferris wheel, yeah. All right. So the Jewish people believed that God would come back, God would show up if you just kept all of the rules. All right. So over here are the first 10 of the rules. We call them the 10 Commandments. These are the first 10. But guess how many total rules they are? 613. So the Pharisees believed that if you kept all 613 commands, and not only them, but if all the Jewish people kept all the 613 laws, then God would show up. And he would take out the Romans, and everything would be back to normal again. They could have their own country back. They would be excited. So the Pharisees believed that not only if they followed the rules, if they got Abigail and Lincoln and Lila and Grady to follow the rules, then God would show up. So their way of believing in God had a lot to do with rules. How do you think Jesus is going to do meeting up with the Pharisees? Raise your hand, do you think Jesus is going to frustrate the Pharisees or not frustrate the Pharisees? Who thinks he's not going to frustrate them at all? They're going to be super happy because Jesus is God. And so if God shows up, he's going to keep all the rules. Right? Who says, no, I think Jesus is going to make the Pharisees mad? Oh, you've read the Bible. Yes. Okay, here. We're going to do first story, Elena. Here we go. Scene 1, healing a paralyzed man. So Jesus was in a house teaching about God, healing people. Some friends. There's a guy whose legs didn't work. And, if your legs don't work, you kind of have to do this, right? So, didn't have wheelchairs. Didn't have wheelchairs back then. Shh. Yep. Oh, you know the story. So what happened was the paralyzed man had some friends. The friends were bringing the paralyzed man to who? To Jesus. They couldn't get in because the house was too full, crowded. So they got up on the roof, which is weird. How do you get a paralyzed man up on a roof? Luke? They broke. Well, how do you get up to the roof? Okay, don't know. Well, let's just imagine they floated up to the top of the roof. And then they had to dig. Oh, that's true. Sometimes there is steps. You're right. There was actually, okay? Or they either had to dig through the roof or take apart the clay tiles. One or the other. And then guess what they did? They lowered the paralyzed man down into the middle of the crowd. Could you imagine all of a sudden if drywall started to fall down right now? And then Abigail looks up and goes, and then then you see sunlight, and then people start hacking and making a big, huge hole. And we're all like, well, this will be interesting. Okay. And then we're like, oh, don't pay attention to the hole. Let's keep talking. And then a person starts to float down from the sky. And you're like, no, pay attention to me. And you guys are like, no, Jeremy, you're not interesting at all. We got to watch this. And all of a sudden, a man on a mat is lowered. And we're all like, you don't see that every day. Comes down. So Jesus is like, all right. And so Jesus looks at the guy and he says, your sins are forgiven.
He doesn't even ask anything.
That's weird. He doesn't even ask. And guess who gets mad at Jesus for saying your sins are forgiven? Who do you think, Molly? No, not the paralyzed man. The people we talked about before. Not the Philistines. Close. Sounds like the Philistines. The what? Pharisees. The Pharisees. So the Pharisees is like, you can't forgive God, can't forgive somebody. Only who can forgive? Only two people can forgive an offense. One is God. The other is the one who is offended. Max and Luke, can I borrow you for a minute? Since you're brothers, come up here and stand. Which one of you is meaner to the other? Luke. Okay, everybody says Luke. All right, here we go. Luke is like, what? Let's imagine that Luke was frustrated with Max about something and decks him. Do you know what that means? I'm sorry, he punched his lights out. Do you know what that means? So let's say Luke gets his nice little fist. Going on here. Go ahead, show us your fist. Okay, now a fist, you got to really curl those fingers in. And my karate teacher told me, make sure you get that thumb really nice and tight. Otherwise, you could break your thumb when you punch somebody. I'm helping you out here. And then you want to punch with this little section right here, because when it happens, boom, right there. See, how'd that feel? Look, my knuckle prints were on his face, and it won't break your fingers when you punch somebody. So you got to punch with these knuckles right here. Just trying to help you out, Lucas. All right, so let's say Luke just punches his brother right in the face. All right, who's hurting? Raise your hand. Who's hurting right now? Jack? Max. Why is Max hurting, Jack? Because Luke punched him. Where specifically might he be hurting, Jack? In his face or his nose, right. He might have a bloody nose, right. And Luke is over top of him going, ha! Take that. Don't mess with me. No, I'm not saying you do this. I'm just using this as an illustration. Now, let's say Jeremy comes along. I don't live at their house. I don't know. Let's say I pop over and say, hey, guys, how's it going? Oh, Max. That looks like that hurts. And Luke's over here going, oh, look at that. Look what I did. Max is like, I know. And Jack's over there going. And I come along and I go, oh, I forgive you, Luke. What does Max think about what I just said? So Max, go ahead and lay on the ground like you're hurting and like, So I say, Luke, I forgive you for what you did. What does Max think about that?
He's like,
No. Well, Molly, what does Max think about that? Shh. Listen. Rude. Okay, rude. Why? Why is it rude? Asher?
well, probably has a big question mark on his face.
Why?
Boy, because he doesn't
Why?
know what to do.
What? He doesn't know why? What does he think about me forgiving Luke? A complete stranger can't come up and forgive Luke. There's only two people who can forgive Luke. One is who? Mason? Yeah, the person who got hurt. Lincoln, sit down. Only one of two people. Max can forgive Luke, right? Let's say Luke is sorry. Oh, Max, I'm so sorry. My fist got the better of me, right? And I'm so sorry for hitting you in the face. And Max can say, I'm not forgiving you, right? Who's the other person that can forgive Luke? God. And the reason why, is because Luke has not only offended Max by punching him, he's also offended God, because who created Max? God did. Thank you. All right. So Jesus comes along. Go ahead and sit down, guys. Thank you for your help. Jesus comes along, a perfect stranger, and looks at this paralyzed man and says, your sins are forgiven. And all of her sons are like, whoa, wait a minute. He hurt me. He didn't hurt you. And so should Jesus be the one who's forgiving sins? Yes. No, because only one of two people can forgive. Who's that?
Only three.
What, Max?
Me.
You. So only the person who got hurt and...
God.
So what is Jesus claiming to be? Go ahead, put it up there, Elena. Next one. What is Jesus claiming to be? He's claiming to be what?
Jesus was forgiving under God.
Right. So what? So only who can forgive? The one who's offended and God. So if he's not the one who's offended, who's Jesus claiming to be?
God.
At the time, can a human be a God?
No.
So. Yeah, go ahead, Abby. Jesus is right. So Jesus says, why are you offended? Listen, would you rather I have just said, pick up your mat and walk? I'll prove to you that I have the authority on the earth to forgive sins. And the next slide, he looks at the paralyzed man and says, get up, take up your mat, walk. So the guy takes his mat and goes, sweet. And he walks out. Was the paralyzed man's problem his legs or his sins? Both. Both were his problem. What was the worst problem he had? His legs or his sins? His sins. But what did Jesus also help him with? His legs. Who got mad at him for this? The Pharisees. Why did they get mad at him again, Lincoln?
The Pharisees?
Yeah, why did they get mad at him?
Oh, yeah. Because he did it like
Grady, go ahead, Grady. It's okay, Lincoln.
And the Pharisees were the people who to the Romans.
Okay, yeah, they helped him, yeah. Go ahead.
They were mad because he healed lots of people.
Because he healed lots of people, but what specifically, Max?
Because he wasn't the one that was hurting.
Because he wasn't the one who was hurting. He was claiming to be God. All right, next story. This is Jesus and the Pharisees. He kind of keeps ticking them off. So Jesus is walking along by a lake, sees somebody who collects taxes. Somebody who steals people's money. That's what a tax collector was. And he says to one of the tax collectors, Matthew, come follow me. And Matthew goes, okay. So we have his book of the Bible now. The book of Matthew is that guy. So Matthew used to be a tax collector, and now he's following Jesus. Guess who Matthew's friends were? Other tax collectors, right? If Matthew was a tax collector, who were his friends? Other tax collectors. So Matthew says, hey, come over to my house and have dinner with me and my friends. And Jesus says, no way, Jose, you're all a bunch of sinners. I can't hang out with sinners because that breaks the Pharisees' rule of eating with sinners. One of the Pharisees' rule was if you eat with sinners, then God's world is not going to come here. What did Jesus say? I'll come over and eat at your house. That sounds like fun. And who did he frustrate again? The Pharisees. So Jesus eats with sinners. Elena, put up the slide. It's super funny what Jesus says. When the Pharisees were mad at him, Jesus says, healthy people don't need a doctor. Sick people do. Have you guys ever gone to Essentia Health Clinic here in Hayward? Totally fine. And said, I need to see a doctor. And they say, well, what's wrong? And you're like, nothing. And then they say, well, what are you doing here? I don't know. I wanted to talk to my doctor. Well, what do you want to talk to him about? Fishing. Life. Well, he doesn't have time to see you if you're not sick. Okay, my eyebrow hurts. Oh, well, are you sure your eyebrow hurts? Yeah, I just want to talk to my... What? So you don't go to the doctor unless you're sick, right? And how many of you guys like going to the doctor? You think going to the doctor is so fun? How many of you guys hate going to the doctor because you feel like you're going to get more sick? Oh, they both work there. Wow, that's cool. Who does Jesus spend time with? The sick people. I know, Tyler, you've had people work on you before, haven't you? Elena, do we have another slide here? Okay, hang on, listen. This is so funny. Imagine I've left my coffee cup in my office. So I have a coffee cup, and what if I leave a tiny bit of coffee in there overnight? What will happen to the cup? Molly? Okay, it might stain the bottom, right? Because it kind of, what does it do in there, Luke? It sticks in there. So in the morning, if I didn't wash out the cup, now I have to use the scrubby thing to get that out of there, right? But I could make the outside look really cool, and I could say, here, Max, don't I have a really cool cup? And Max would go, yeah, you have a really nice cup. Until he looks where? Inside. So your outside could look good, but your inside could be absolutely moldy and gross. Jesus said to the Pharisees, you are so careful to clean the outside of the cup, but the inside is what? Filthy. That's my favorite word in that one. Filthy. Your lives are just like this. So when clean people are watching, but inside you are full of hate, greed, and pride, you're worse than your Hebrew ancestors. You know, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You have great knowledge. You know a lot about God, but you don't enter God's kingdom. In fact, you keep other people from entering. Did he make the Pharisees, did he make friends that day? No. So basically he says, Lincoln, you're not only clean on the outside, you are super dirty on the inside. Right, so look, Lincoln just got offended. What do you think the Pharisees felt like? They did this. What happens if you hold your anger in for too long, Joseph?
It'll break out. It'll turn you.
It's going to what? I like his word. Say that louder, Joseph. Lash. If you hold your anger in, what's going to happen eventually? You're going to freak out. And that happens in a minute. Here we go. Scene 3. He heals on the Sabbath day. The Pharisees believed that if you kept the Sabbath day holy and you didn't do any work on that day, what would happen? God would come. Okay? So it was really important for the Pharisees that people didn't do any work on what day? What day was Sabbath? Does anybody know? Saturday, right? So anytime they caught people doing work, what would they do? I saw you work. So would that be fun if you were like hanging out on a Saturday, doing stuff, and all of a sudden there were these rule police that were going like, oh, no working. Oh, no working. They would be, so what's your question, Joseph? Exactly. So then they would have to come up with more rules so that they would answer questions like Joseph just asked. Is playing video games working? I mean, my thumbs are moving. Does that work? So they would have rules about what work was and what work wasn't. So the Pharisees didn't just have 613 laws. They had thousands. You know why? Because of exactly what Joseph said. Well, what does it mean to not work? Do you think Jesus is going to frustrate the Pharisees on this or not frustrate the Pharisees on this? Frustrate them for sure. So Jesus, go ahead, throw that up, Elena. I can't remember. So Jesus healed people on the Sabbath day. So there's one guy who had a crippled hand and Jesus healed it. Guess what day it was? Sabbath day, Saturday. And so he did this a number of times. Question, do you think he healed on the Sabbath day on purpose?
Yes.
Micah's like, oh yes, he totally did. Because who did he want to frustrate? The Pharisees. And so the Pharisees asked him, like, why do you do this? And Jesus said this, I don't do any of this on my own. I only do what who tells me to do? Father. So is Jesus walking around going, I'm excited to tick off this Pharisee. I'm excited to make this Pharisee mad. Was that what Jesus was trying to do? No. He only did whatever God told him to do. Who's the source of life? God. Who gives him the power to heal? God. Who gives Jesus the power to raise the dead? God. Who gives Jesus the power to give life? Does Jesus himself have power to heal? Who does? God. So often people say, Jesus healed people. This is hard for me to say. Jesus did not heal people. Who healed people? God did. God did. Now listen very carefully. Jesus did not heal people. Who healed people? God did. If we are followers of Jesus, if you choose to follow Jesus, you are a human just like Jesus was. Do you have the power to heal people? Yes. Who has the power to heal people? God. Do you have a relationship with God that you can talk to him and ask him to heal somebody? Yes. Does Jesus have a relationship with God and could ask him to heal people? Yes. So Jesus, it's very important. He's not just telling the people, he's not just ticking off the Pharisees on purpose. But who's really ticking off the Pharisees? God is. The author of life, the one who rules the world. Those who listen and believe in me, Jesus, will find new life with God that is never ending. So what is he really saying to the Pharisees? Okay, so the Pharisees, if you don't break any laws, you'll go to heaven. But what is Jesus really saying to the Pharisees, Max?
I don't know.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say, isn't God the one that made the 10 Commandments?
Yes. Yep. So should you keep those laws? Yeah. Why? Do you remember why we had the covenant in the first place? What was the purpose? To show what? Show the world who God was. And God's not somebody who steals, murders, lies. So we don't keep those laws because we should. We keep those laws because we're showing the world what God is like. Aha! Does that make sense? The Pharisees were doing the laws so that they could get from God what they felt like they deserved. That's like only being good so you get Christmas presents.
It's not all about...
You're only good so that Santa will put you on the whatever, the good list. No, I don't know anybody. All right, Grady, a few minutes ago you said the Pharisees would eventually do something to Jesus. What was that? Say that again.
They would eventually take him to It's Not Fair, but...
What happened? What did they do to Jesus? They didn't crucify him, the Romans did. But what did the Pharisees do with the Romans? Yeah. So the Pharisees were plotting. This is what your anger does if you don't deal with it. You find ways to murder people. Now, you guys might not actually kill somebody, but Jesus says our words kill people. Not literally, but they. How many guys have ever, somebody has said something really mean to you and it deeply hurt your feelings? Yeah. Jesus says that's just like you committing murder. All right? So what did the Pharisees end up doing? Oh yeah, they ended up really murdering Jesus because that's where anger that you don't let God help you with goes. It eventually kills people. Yes, Joseph?
They say they're all about God and stuff, but on there it says no murdering. They murdered him.
Right, isn't that crazy? They broke one of the commandments because they were that mad at Jesus.